All right, so we're going to jump in. A little bit of background about Citizenship Day. As I said, we've been doing this as One America for about 5 years. Also, my name is Lily Hankins. I coordinate the Washington New Americans program at One America. And we've been doing this program for about 5 years. The goal of our program is to expand access to citizenship for people across Washington State. The latest numbers say that there's about 180,000 people all across the state who are eligible to apply for citizenship. They have their green card. They've had it for 3 or 5 years. But in a given year, less than 10% of those people actually do so because there's a number of barriers to the process. It's expensive, it's complicated legally, things like that. And that's where we're coming in, is to try to address some of those barriers and help people get over the hump to citizenship. So Citizenship Day is a day-long free legal workshop where people get one-on-one application assistance and meet with pro bono immigration attorneys for free. It's a great service. It's one of the few free citizenship services still around, especially all across the state of Washington. A few things about why it's important for people to be able to become citizens if they want to. As you might know, you cannot vote unless you're a citizen. So if we could get all 180,000 of those people to be able to vote, that would, help expand their voice in the democracy that we live in. There are certain jobs in public employment that are limited to citizens. They can access different public benefits than non-citizens can. They are able to petition for family members to come and join them in the U.S. much more easily than people with green cards. And they don't have to report their every move to USCIS anymore, which is always a big thing for people. If you're a legal permanent resident and you move across states or even just to a new address, you have to report to USCIS. So getting folks citizenship is a big factor for them. So thank you again for being here and for helping us do that. This training will go over what to expect at Citizenship Day, and then we'll be doing an in-depth training on the sort of legal components of citizenship and the form, so you can learn how to help people actually fill out their application forms. So on slide number 3, the reminders for what your responsibilities are. The main thing to remember is that these are real people's stories. You will all be, either if you're greeting people at the door or if you're meeting with people as paralegals, be sure to take a minute to establish rapport, welcome the person, introduce them, make sure that you kind of make that human connection, because that's going to help people establish trust with you. And as you'll see, this form is very involved. The filling out a citizenship application form asks a lot of personal information, and we want to make sure that people trust us enough to give us that information. We'll be talking about confidentiality a little bit later, but obviously confidentiality is huge as part of the day. It's important when you're doing application forms and also when you're helping fill out the intake form, which is the yellow form that we'll be going over, that you go through every question, that you ask questions multiple ways in case people aren't understanding. And then if you're working as a paralegal and you're getting to some of the more sensitive questions and you feel like maybe they have their brother or their sister or their husband or their child with them, and you feel like maybe their answers are being a little bit censored because of that, flag down one of the One America staff and we'll make sure that we can sensitively have that person work by themselves so that you can get accurate information. And then, ultimately the attorneys will review after any of us see the clients, and so if there's anything that you're worried about legally or anything, just make sure that you make a note of it and flag it for the attorney when they get to the point of the attorney. So those are some initial things. When folks come into Citizenship Day, we're on slide 4 now, there are 6 basic areas that they'll be moving throughout the day. The first station that folks go to is the intake station, where they're greeted, and they'll fill out the yellow intake form starting on the second page of it that you've seen. The second station that they'll go to is the forms preparation station, which is where those of you who are volunteering as paralegals will be stationed to help them actually complete their citizenship application form. Then they go to an attorney review. After the attorney review, they go to quality review, which is a second attorney who has an extensive amount of experience with naturalization, just doing one last review. The copy station, where they will stop by and get copies made of all of their paperwork, their application form, their supporting documents, their green card, everything that they need to mail with it, and also a copy for themselves to keep so they have a full copy of everything that's getting sent in. And then the exit station, where we give them any resources that they might need, for example, referrals to ESL classes, citizenship preparation classes, and make sure that they understand what needs to happen next. Typically just go to the post office and mail the application. One thing to know is that we do this very intentionally. We have folks see 2 attorneys very intentionally. Sometimes people don't want to wait to see that second attorney, but it's very important. As you'll hear when we get to the legal components, if people's forms are incorrect, it can not only impact their ability to naturalize, but may also put them into removal proceedings if something goes horribly wrong. That's never happened at Citizenship Day because we have a lot of systems in place to prevent it, but you can explain that to folks if you see people getting a little bit bored or agitated as they're waiting to see a second attorney, that it's really important for that second review. On slide number 5, talks a little bit about what to expect on Citizenship Day. We ask that our volunteers arrive at 8 a.m. You'll get, in addition to this training, you'll get a site-specific orientation depending on where you're volunteering. And then you get breakfast, coffee, all that stuff's going to be provided for you. And you can meet the attorneys and sort of get to know what the site's going to be like. The doors will open at 10. Frequently we have a line starting at 8 or 9 a.m. So we don't let folks in, but we often will let them start filling out their intake forms so that they get ready and then they come in and we get started. The doors will close at 3, but we ask that you expect to stay until 5 or 5:30. And then to ensure that we can move people as quickly as possible through the stations for our busier sites, we will have one particular paralegal designated who will evaluate people's English proficiency. Because as you'll see, there's some components around that to see if people are actually eligible to apply. We have done some edits to the intake form if you volunteered before, and then if clients have any criminal history at all, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they will go to a special designated attorney with expertise in the intersection between immigration and criminal law so that they can be cleared to see if it's actually worth them applying today or if they need to wait or maybe aren't eligible because of that situation. A couple of key reminders. On the front page of that yellow form, the intake form, most volunteer stations have a section on there that's your responsibility. So depending on if you're a paralegal or maybe you're the copy station volunteer, there's some checklists that you're going to be responsible for checking off that you've done these things with the client. And we will be asking you to make sure that you do that. The yellow forms are very key because they're sort of our internal quality review, because obviously we're sending the client home with a copy of their application and they're mailing in the other application and we don't have it. So we want to make sure we know what happened with the client, who did they see, was there any follow-up needed, that kind of thing. So they're very important, so familiarize yourself with those forms. Between each of those 6 stations that I identified, each client will be checked off by someone called the flow manager, which is going to be somebody wearing a One America t-shirt, who is keeping track of all the clients and sort of as they progress through the different stations. Because depending on people's different situations, one person might go through really fast because they're really simple, and someone else might have multiple complications and need to go in a different order and be there quite a bit longer. So for that reason, we ask that whenever you're done with a client, you either track down the person who's the flow manager or you have like a designated volunteer, which this will all be oriented. You'll be oriented to all this on the site. Find the flow manager and let them know, okay, they're done with the paralegal, they're ready for the next stage, and then we'll move them around that way. Just that way, that helps us know that everybody gets to every single station. At the end of the day, all clients should leave with, everybody will get a little client packet, which says what to do next, has all the questions that they need to study for their interview, and a lot of other stuff. Or they will get a little pink slip that says that they're not eligible to file from the attorney, and it explains why. Maybe they need to wait, maybe they need to not apply until they resolve a tax issue or something. And then those who are eligible to apply should get a completed and signed N400 form, which is the application for citizenship. And so that's where we hope that folks leave with.
We have a question?
Are all these forms done in the different languages?
Good question.
I mean, the information that they get?
Yeah, good question. We do have the client packet information in multiple different languages. The N400 form is only in English. That's the only way that USCIS offers it. So that won't be in multiple languages, which is why we love our interpreters. And we'll get to some stuff about, folks should have a basic level of English proficiency, with a few exceptions, to file in general. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's a good question. Now we're on slide number 7, which is talking about fee waivers. When you are working with clients, specifically for paralegals, but this is good information for all volunteers, we want to ask everybody that if they know that the filing fee for citizenship is $680. I don't know if you guys knew that, but it's a lot. And if they know that, or if they are able to pay that, great. Do they want to find out if they qualify for a fee waiver? If they're not able to pay it, we can help them do that. A fee waiver is essentially a separate form. There's the citizenship application form, and then there's another immigration form that they can fill out that's essentially asking Citizenship and Immigration Services to not charge them the $680. It's discretionary. They can decide to approve it or not, but folks, we can help people apply for it. And fee waivers are given to people that are under 150% of the federal poverty level. One of the handouts you got was the actual fee waiver form, and then we have a special fee waiver screening form that has a chart with the poverty level guidelines on it. So you can check with folks right there. And then the other way that they will give fee waivers is if people receive public benefits, for example, food stamps, Medicaid, anything that is means tested. So it means that depending on their income, that determines whether they get the benefit or not. There's also a section of eligibility for the fee waiver called financial hardship, which is complicated and really hard to prove, and we just don't do it at Citizenship Day because it doesn't really work very well. So just know that, and we'll go over how to fill out those forms a little bit later. So for clients who maybe don't qualify for the citizen, we're on slide number 8. For clients that don't qualify for the fee waiver, but maybe they're still going to have difficulty coming up with $680, there's something called a citizenship loan in some areas of the state that's offered through credit unions and supportive banks. Depending on the different credit unions, there's different sort of terms and stipulations. The one in King County is really nice because they get upon repayment of the full loan, they actually get $150 back from the credit union to sort of support them. But we will have information about in the sites where those are available, we'll have information about that at that resource sort of exit table. But if you hear folks sort of struggling with the money thing and they're confused or they don't know how they're going to come up with it, know that that's a secondary option. And there's actually a question on the intake form about if people are interested in the citizenship loan. That's information we can give them.
Is that an interest-free loan?
Depends on the credit union. The one in King County, I think, is extremely low. I don't think any of them are no interest, but the one in King County is really low, and then the other ones are sort of more like medium rate. But it still means that folks can pay like $70 a month for 9 months or something, 10 months, instead of paying $680 all at once. So it can be a big deal. We talked about the intake form checklist. This is just a slide on slide number 9 to remind you to fill out your checklist depending on your volunteer role. Who's volunteering as an interpreter?
I can be.
Cool.
Yes, so can I.
Okay, great. We love you.
Can you be a paralegal but speak the other language?
Yes, if you speak the other language, that's fine. As you go through the form, you'll realize that some of the legalese on the form is pretty complicated. So if it's not your first or second, if it's not a fluent language for you, I would make sure that you actually feel competent in that language before you agree to do that without an interpreter, but that's totally fine. When you're working with an interpreter, you're just going to want to make sure that you explain to the client that everything is confidential. When you get onto the site, you will sign a confidentiality agreement saying that you will not, anything that you learn about clients, you're not going to be disclosing it outside of that space at all. And so interpreters will be signing that too, and it's a good thing to let the client know, like, I've signed it and this interpreter signed it, we're not sharing your information. We ask that our interpreters do word-for-word translation, not summarize what the person said. And so when you're working with an interpreter, please make sure to pause to let the interpreter translate. And sometimes it's a good reminder for the clients to tell them to pause to let the interpreter translate as well. It's hard work, so if you notice that your interpreter is having a hard time or maybe needs a glass of water, stop, get a glass of water, let them do that. It's important. So one thing that is new, and on the citizenship application form, there's a new version of the citizenship application form that was newly released. We'll be using it for the first time this time at Citizenship Day. It's a lot longer and a bit more complicated. But one of the things that was added is there's actually an interpreter statement. It's on page 19 and 20 of the N400 form. This is only required if people are requesting an exemption to the English portion of the citizenship requirements, and they used an interpreter when completing the form. If those two things are met, then the client and the interpreter will be doing these sections. So if you're maybe going to be interpreting, make sure you review that section and that that's something you're comfortable signing. It basically says, I certify that I speak this language and I translated this whole thing. So make sure you know about that.
Well, my name's Greg Rogers, and we have done this in this room many times before. I think it really was the feedback that we were getting from other people who were on the line. So I'm an attorney in ALAN. I've been doing this for years as well. I also really appreciate the work that you're doing because we're a team when we're doing these things. There's a lot of work to do. So let's go through these things because I know Lily wants to try to make sure we meet our timeline here. These are the basic eligibility requirements. We're looking at slide number 12 on the screen. 18 years old. The person has to be that old. There's then certain things that we're going to go through as a bit of a detail. The residency requirements, you have to show that you've resided in the United States. You also have to show that you've been physically present in the United States. So residency and presence are two different issues. And then you have to show that you have good moral character within a particular period of time especially. Speak, read, and write English. We've already heard a bit that there can be an exception. People can use interpreters for certain issues. Knowledge of U.S. history and civics, and then willingness to take the oath of allegiance at the end. That's a mandatory part of the process. So let's talk about the next slide, which is slide number 13. So what is this residency, continuous residence? So the person has to have been a lawful permanent resident for a specific amount of time. So for most people, that's going to be a 5-year window of time that they have to have met. So if you look at their green card, and not all of them are green, by the way, a lot of them are pink and blue, but if you look at the card that they present to you, it has the date there. It shows you when they became a permanent resident. So at least 5 years have to have gone by for most people, or 3 years for people if they're filing based on marriage. And when I say at least that amount of time, there are some provisions that allow a person to file a little bit early. Most of the people you talk to will have far exceeded the 3 or 5 years, and you'll probably mostly be speaking with people about 5 years. The residence has to be continuous. Some people get worried. I mean, I can't have left the United States. Absolutely wrong. A person can have left and can have traveled fairly regularly, fairly often, and even for fairly significant periods of time in one absence. But they have to show that particularly long absences actually break what this continuous residence issue is. We'll talk a little bit about that. You have to have resided for 3 months in the district in which you're filing. So people who have maybe just moved into the area, it's really not going to be an issue because there's a 3-month exception here that we'll talk about a little bit. But if you just moved in, it's something to be thinking about when they give you the address information. They also still have to reside in the United States after they file it. It doesn't mean they can't leave the United States. They're still allowed to do that kind of traveling, but they have to continue to live in the United States after they do the filing. And as I said at the bottom thing on the slide there, it says you can actually apply 3 months before you meet the residence requirement if you're going to, before you meet the 5-year issue. The 3-year issue is just a word of caution. You have to have been married to the U.S. citizen for a full 3 years, and that citizen has to have been a citizen for the full 3 years. You cannot file any earlier than that 3-year date, even though you can maybe not have been a permanent resident for a full 3 years. So it's a little bit of a tricky question. Make sure you understand it or talk to an attorney when you're dealing with the question. All right, we're going to go to the next slide, the physical presence. Pretty easy one here. You have to have been in the United States for at least half of the time of either the 3 or 5-year period of time. And there's a process. You add that up and you determine whether they are in for half of the 5 years or half of the 3 years. The complicated parts really get into the good moral character issue. What is good moral character? And then you ask 20 different people and they'll give you 20 different answers for it, right? So the US government has some standards that it looks at. There's a couple things that are just absolute issues. You cannot apply to become a citizen. You will not become a citizen if you're convicted of what's called an aggravated felony after November 29, 1990. Now, this is not what you and I think of as a felony or an aggravated felony. It's a special immigration set of terminology, and it's something that the lawyers will look at. Murder is also one of the ones. I don't see that on here. But murder, if you've been convicted of murder, you're not going to become a citizen. And then there are some other things that if they occur within the 3 or 5 year window, they are issues that the government says you cannot naturalize if these things occurred. If they occurred outside the 3 or 5 year window, it's something to consider, and the person can probably proceed, but not within the 3 or 5 year period. This highlights one of the issues. Why would I choose 5 years or 3 years? Some people might have had one of these issues that occurred 4 years ago, and if they qualify for a 3-year filing, you want to do that 3-year filing for them because that puts it outside the window of the time that the government's going to say this is a bar to naturalizing. And some of those things that they look at, conviction of and on this slide it says CIMT, or admission of crime involving moral turpitude. All right, so we got moral character and moral turpitude. Even more complicated again. The attorneys are going to be dealing with these. Issues like 2 or more offenses, where the sentences, 5 or more years, controlled substance violations. We're going to probably start seeing more and more of these issues as Washington and Colorado have issues where the state law is different than the federal law. Immigration is a federal issue, so we have to be really careful about that. And then you can see other things, false testimony to get a benefit, prostitution or commercialized vice, alien smuggling. A lot of people wonder about that. I mean, even if a parent takes a child across a border who's not authorized to come into the United States, that can be considered alien smuggling. And so one of the questions, or part of the series of questions we talk about are, do you have any children who are undocumented? Do you have children who aren't permanent residents? Part of the reasoning behind it is to find out, well, how did they get into the United States? Did you bring them in? Were you responsible? Things like that. Some complicated ones in terms of just definition. What's a habitual drunkard? Illegal gambling. Of course, internet gambling is a hot topic these days. So these are some of the things that we start looking at. Are these character issues, are these issues that occurred within the 3 or 5 year window? If they did, it's something to consider. It might be a bar during that 3 or 5 year window. They might have to apply later, but they shouldn't apply at this time. The next slide is number 18. 16. Can't read without my glasses, or with my glasses, but I can't see far away without them. So, good moral character. These are discretionary issues, so even if they occurred outside the windows, the government can consider these things. We still want to say then that if a person had one of these issues, we want to add more to show that they're really a good person. So that's why it says submit evidence of good character. Certain other crimes, false testimony, child support, really, really big one. Number of the questions on the naturalization filing. Do you have children, whether in or outside the marriage? You have child support issues. Have you paid your taxes? Tax violation issues. Have you registered for selective service? For a lot of men, they didn't realize that they have to register for selective service. So these are issues that we look at to try to figure out, did they occur? And if they did, even though they're outside the window of time, they might be worth adding other information about why this person's a good character. All right, we go to slide number 17, the English language ability. Again, this is something that's determined at the interview, so if someone comes up at the time you're talking with them and they're saying, I'm sorry, my English is not so good, and you seem to understand it pretty well, they can still study and improve their English capabilities before the examination, which won't be scheduled for another maybe about 3 months from the date of filing. So that does give them some time to do that. Basically, it's pretty easy stuff about 4th grade level, reading and writing a sentence or two, just very basic questions. We say it's about 4th grade level. A lot of people ask, well, can I get exempted from that so I don't have to take the English language test? Certain people can be exempted, and it's on the form now. It's part of the questioning process. If you're 50 years old at the time of filing, and you've been a permanent resident for at least 20 years, again, as of the date of filing, you can be exempted from the English language test, but you're going to still take the history exam in the language of your choice. So you can get that interpreter and you can have the examination in your own language. If you're 55 at the time of filing and you've been a permanent resident at least 15 years at that time, you can also get exempted from the English language test, although you will be taking the history civics one in the language of your choice. And there's a waiver, a disability waiver for people who cannot learn or cannot, not just, I don't speak it, it's too difficult. No, it's a medically or a diagnosable condition that a person has to have. Let's talk about number 18. Now we got to 18, U.S. history and civics. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, there's so many, how do I know what I'm going to be asked? Well, there are 100 questions that the government has published on the website. We'll have them all at the site in English and other languages as well. We have the answers in English and other languages as well. And what it is the person's asked to answer 6 out of 10 questions correctly. So when this happens at the interview, the questions pop up on the screen for the person who's doing the interview. You can almost see it on their face with, oh, okay, there they are. They just show up. And they'll start asking these questions. And if they get through 6 and the person's answered right, that's it. You're done. No more questions to ask. If you get a question wrong, you can still have 4 questions wrong and still pass the exam. And if you don't pass the exam, you can have the test done at a later time. You'll have an opportunity to do that. Most people pass the test on the first chance. You study those things. They have flashcards. They have all sorts of different ways to do it. We'll have those at the site so people can take that home with them and do it. You can also get it off the immigration site. There is, remember again, if you're even exempt from the English language test, you are going to get the test in your language, the history test, in your language of your choice at the process. But there's an issue here. If you're 65 years old at the time of filing and at least 20 years of permanent resident, you indicate that, your list of questions narrows from 100 down to 20. And you'll still have to get 6 out of 10 right, but you only have 20 questions to have to study for. So it's a really helpful thing, and again, the language, it can be tested in language of your choice. So some really nice things to help. Yes, excuse me? Oh, I think they were talking to someone else. All right, and then again, there's a disability waiver. We have the forms there as well for you to be able to deal with. All right, so now, sometimes this happens when we're in these programs. This is slide number 19. Who should not apply for citizenship? The one thing that we're most fearful about as a lawyer, and especially because we're only meeting these people for the first time and the only time. We're going to meet them, we're going to say goodbye, and then they're going to go off to the examination. And what none of us want to do is to submit documents to the government that will not only not get them naturalized, but that will get them deported. So it is possible to submit information that is just so damaging to them that they could do this. So on this one, again, some of the issues I talked about, aggravated felony, an individual who's done that. False claim to U.S. citizenship is a really serious one. Now, there are issues that are there. I'll talk about those in a little bit. False or misleading information to the government. CIMT, crime involving moral turpitude within 5 years of admission. Admission is in quotes there because admission doesn't necessarily mean a certain kind of event of arriving in the United States. Unlawful voting, again, that's a serious issue. A lot of high schools, they do this big, get the vote out, people register for voting and didn't realize, oh, I'm not able to vote, I'm not a citizen. So there are some exceptions to that, but this is something to make sure is red flag to the lawyer. And certainly if a person unlawfully obtained a green card, you're not allowed to naturalize after having illegally obtained a green card. There's a question here.
We've run into a problem with the driver's license form saying, would you like to register to vote? And a lot of people check it without realizing, I mean, if you're asked the question in isolation, they think, oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah. The attorneys have a specialized set of documents that include some government memoranda that talk about how the government can go through the process and determine whether this is really one that's going to be worthy of not granting citizenship and even deportation. Like the kids and voting and stuff, I usually find that that's generally, especially if they registered but didn't vote, those are things that are a little less serious. Do you have any comment on that, Lily?
Just that these are things that can be potentially addressed. For example, that situation, that can be potentially addressed, but it's definitely something that an attorney needs to be doing, and potentially this client might not be best served at Citizenship Day if there's additional things that they need to do. In some cases, they need to unregister themselves and then submit proof that they've done that and then write all this stuff together. So it doesn't mean that they absolutely can never become a citizen and they're absolutely going to be deported, but this is like what we need to red flag.
And that's the important thing. I always think if you're doing this and you're thinking, something seems a little bit off, something's a little wrong. It's just like when you're talking with the client who's in front of you, and you realize when they're answering questions, they're seeming to be a little bit reserved about it, more than in the other questions. And then you realize, oh my gosh, this person's spouse is sitting next to them. I've asked, and you want to, and I'm asking about children who might have been born in or outside the marriage. There are issues where you have to be sensitive to that. And if you've got that issue, make sure you red flag it because it's something you want to make sure the attorney knows about. I always tell my paralegals, if you noticed it, you need to let me know because I'll be the one to make that final decision about whether we apply or not. So we'll go on to the next one, number 20, filing the completed form. This is the great thing, you get through the whole process. It does take quite a while. This form is actually much longer this year than in the past. In order to do it, we don't want to send someone out with an incomplete form or incomplete information. So we want to be sure they have a complete and accurate N400. So there's not you, just you, then the attorney, and then there's quality control. So we do that 3 sets of eyes. You have to have 2 sets of passport-style photos. Some of the places have photos right there? I don't think so.
No.
So we usually, if they don't have them with them, we have information about where they can get them nearby, with them blocks generally. They have to do a check or money order, as she said, for the $680. That includes the biometrics fee or the waiver. Both sides of the green card have to be copied. Even though the back doesn't look like it has much, that's something the government needs to see. And then we tell people, please don't just send this, put it in the postal box, right in the mail. We want certified mail. We have envelopes, we have labels, we have all sorts of ways for them to be able to say, this is what I need to do, drop it in, seal it up, and send it out the door. Next slide is the intake form. Lots of words on there. Excuse me, the biometrics fee, that's included in the $680. The biometrics fee itself is $85.
And that's a fee that USCIS charges to run what they call biometrics, which is essentially a background check based on people's fingerprints, which they will do after filing. So we don't tell everybody that it's this much money plus 85. We just say it's 680, but technically it's 2 different fees, but they go on the same money order.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. I thought you were asking about the cost of the biometrics fee. So again, part of the honesty and we're on the intake form, we tell people, you need to be honest and truthful and complete with us. So some people are a little hesitant to talk about, especially because they've never met you, they've never met the lawyer, about a crime they committed in the past or something like that. You let them know, you're going to be fingerprinted. This is going to be run through the FBI. They are going to know about this stuff. And so if you don't tell me so I can get it on the form or determine whether we should file this or not, it's going to come up later, and it's going to come up later as in, why did you lie on the form that you completed for us? So it's an important issue. Honesty is really there. On this intake form, for the paralegals, you are not required to sign the form, but you really do want to make sure you read through this and help the people understand that this is something that they need to be truthful, accurate, honest with us. You're going to be hearing, and you want them to know that you're going to be very closed about the information that you get from them. You're not going to talk about it with other people. It is private and secure as far as they're concerned. The attorneys will be signing this form along with the individual. Pass it over to you.
Yep. Thanks, Greg. And you can find the client agreement form, the most updated version of it, on the back of the first page of the yellow intake. So again, you won't need to be citing this, but be familiar with what it says so that you know what we're telling our clients we're providing. So, starting with slide number 22, I just want to take a quick, go ahead.
Do we physically fill this one out, or does the client physically fill this one out?
Good question. So on the yellow intake form, starting with essentially the 3rd page, the 2nd actual page, that starts to ask for client's information, name, address, etc. They will be filling that out. However, we will have a group of volunteers at the intake station helping people. We have clients with all different levels of literacy, and there are folks that might need you to actually ask the questions and fill it out for them. So look over it and see what's in there. So at this point on slide number 22, the rest of the training is going to go in detail through the N400 form, which is the application form. It's really useful if you can stay, regardless of what your volunteer role is signed up for. However, if you do need to leave and you are not a paralegal, it's okay for you to do that at this point. I recommend, especially if you might be interpreting, that you go through this because we'll be talking about all the language that appears on the form. But if you're in the office or on the phone and you're signed up as anything other than a paralegal and you have somewhere you need to be, you can sign off at this point. Make sure that you send Ellicott, who sent out the reminder this morning, or myself, whose email is at the end of the PowerPoint, an email, if you're on the phone, letting us know that you attended if you are going to sign up. But again, you don't need to. I'm just letting you know that that's what the rest of the training is. If any of the folks on the phone have questions before you maybe are going to sign off, I'll give you a second to ask them. All right. So starting with slide number 22, actually filling out the N400 form. I encourage you to grab the form. You have it if you're here in person, or you can pull it up on the USCIS website if you're on a computer. Look at it. It's very important. On every single page, there's a section for the A number, which is a number that appears on people's green card or permanent resident card, and you need to fill that in on every single page. Throughout this, we'll talk about, depending on your site, you may be filling out the form electronically, like in Adobe Reader, entering things in, or by hand. You must, if you're doing it by hand, it has to be in black ink, no blue ink. They won't accept it. Black ink only. And if you're doing handwriting, they recommend that you use all caps because it's easier for USCIS to read. So if you're handwriting things in, just do it that way so that it's very, very clear. They can't, say that they couldn't read something. Or if you're doing it on the computer, then that's easy. So starting with slide number 23, we're getting into the N400. This is the first page of the application form. Part 1 asks about people's, essentially their eligibility. Why based on their residence, what are they actually eligible to file? So you'll probably most often see number 1 and 2, so have been a permanent resident for at least 5 years or 3 years. As Greg went over, those are the requirements depending on if they're married to a U.S. citizen or not. If a client is eligible under both, they are married to a U.S. citizen and it's been more than 5 years, it can be preferable to check number 2 anyway, because that gives them a shorter, it's called the statutory period. It's the period of time that USCIS is looking at their history, and it's the time that they have to establish good moral character during. So if they have the option of doing both, it's preferable to select number 2, because then they're going to only be examined in depth in the last 3 years instead of the last 5 years. And then part 2 is pretty straightforward. It's information about you, your current legal name, and then the name as it appears on the green card or permanent resident card. Sometimes those don't match, so just be aware of that and fill it in as requested. And then if they've used any other names, if they have nicknames or maiden names or anything like that, you fill those in at number 3 in the bottom. Slide number 24, part 2, goes over pretty straightforward information about you. Now, question number 4 asks about name change, and it's important to note that it asks, would you like to legally change your name? In Washington State, just filling this out, saying, yes, I want to change my name to Joe Smith, does not legally change your name. It depends, there's all these different components about what happens at the naturalization ceremony and whether you can actually legally change your name. If they want to change their name and they want to make sure that their citizenship paperwork has the new name, you can go ahead and put that in there. But just let them know that they still need to go to the district court and just like everybody else, what you have to do to change your name. A few highlights. Number 7, the date that you became a permanent resident. You just want to make sure that matches what it says on the green card and that it matches what you put on the first page about their eligibility. Has it actually been at least 5 years or the 4 years and 9 months if they're filing a little bit early. If you've ever done this before or seen the forms before, there's a few things that are added. Question number 11 and 12. Well, question number 11 asks about, is not new, but it asks about disability. If you have a physical or developmental disability that prevents you from learning and you want an exception to the civics or English rule, you would mark yes there, and they also have to fill out a separate form, but have a doctor fill out a form saying that they actually have a medical disability that says that they can't learn. And that would be something we'd be referring them out to find a doctor to do. So you could help them check yes there, but let them know that we won't be able to complete that whole other form for them on site.
Can that be any doctor, or does it have to be a civil surgeon?
It doesn't have to be a civil surgeon. That's a really good question. For filling out the disability waiver, it has to be an MD,
DO, or doctor of osteopathy, or psychiatrist.
Yeah, MD, DO, or psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a civil surgeon, so it can be their primary care provider, but they can't be like a nurse practitioner. But the really exciting new question that I like is number 12, the exemptions from the English test. It very clearly lays out those exemptions that Greg mentioned. So if folks qualify for this, we call it 50-20 or 55-15 rule. You can check it right there, and then the officer will know as they go into it that they're going to be doing the test in their own language, which is great. It needs to have that. Moving on to slide 25.
We have a question in the back.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, maybe you covered this and I missed it. What about people who are 65? What about literacy? Like, are the questions oral on the history test?
Good question. So questions about literacy. So if the person is taking the English test, there is a written and reading component. If they are exempt from the English test, so they fall into any of those 3 waiver age LPR status categories, they will be only taking the test orally, because the civics and history test is always administered orally. The person just asking the questions and they respond. So if they're exempt, that will be happening with an interpreter in their own language. So they won't have to write anything down.
Okay.
So that's a really good question. That does come up. All right, so slide 25, page part 3 and 4, pretty straightforward, contact information. The one thing I would note is that when it asks for residence for the last 5 years, so all addresses where you've lived during the last 5 years, starting with the most recent one. So you start with this first one that says date of residence from whenever to present, and then you fill in all the information. It only gives you space for 4 previous addresses, so if the person's moved a lot in the last 5 years, you may need to create an additional sheet. We'll have these pre-made that are formatted exactly the same way that you can just add on to the back with, say, additional addresses within the last 5 years. Make sure you have a good mailing address for the people, because USCIS uses mail to contact folks about their application. Slide 26 just shows that there's only space for up to 4 addresses.
Question.
So what if someone doesn't remember like the exact house number or, you know, something like that?
Good question. So folks, all of our materials say that people should have their list of previous addresses prepared. However, we will always run into people that don't have the exact things. It is acceptable to write things like approximately for dates. That's the main thing we see is people don't remember, did I move in June or July or whatever. So it's okay to write approximately for dates, or if they know that it was in April, it's okay to default to April 1st. If there's information that's like a house number that's missing, that would be information we would probably want them to go get, if possible. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have it at all, I mean, just put that information down and certainly make sure they get it before they go to the examination. I know I moved around a lot, and sometimes I just forgot that street number, but I think you could file without it. But you don't want to.
Yeah, do your best.
Prefer to have it.
Yeah, yeah. And we can leave it blank and tell them that they have to fill that in before they mail it in, for example.
It's just going to be a little out there question. I'm going to ask because I have a client I'm dealing with right now. So if we have someone who's only using the 3 years, you know, via marriage, and they have to fill out a 5-year residence, we're trying to serve a client in Mexico whose address is this house in this field next to this building for service. That's their legal address, kind of. The postal service there knows how to get a hold of them that way. So how do we fill that out on this form should it come up?
So the question was, this is a person who's got an address where?
It's in Mexico.
In Mexico, okay.
And the address is this
house.
house in this field next to this building.
So so it's going to be delivered, the information is going to be, it's a current address as well, correct?
It's a current address for service, but in this case, we'd be filling it out on here. It's not necessarily following our normal address things. How do we have that problem, and how do we address it? Because I can see it coming up in the 3-year versus 5-year time.
Yeah, I mean, I just, just issues that I've dealt with, some people say there's actually a street and there's a number, but the Postal Service doesn't even go to that. It's a postal box, that's all they use. It's the government's view as well. We say, get as accurate as possible, and so it'd be, Brown House in Third Field from the right, something like that if you have to, I imagine, because there's simply no other assigned address for them. And then if they have a postal box as well, to be able to do that. Some of the forms, just in some of the newer forms, not quite this one, are actually giving a distinction between the postal box address and the actual physical address.
There is on the current address on the form, it says your current address where you live and then a mailing address are separate. So that you can do that. And then, I would just add that the computer's probably not going to let you write all kinds of crazy fields in there. So you may, in that case, you may want to leave it blank and do it by hand. If you're doing it on a computer, print it out and then fill it in by hand and flag it that you've done that. All right, good question. Not something I've actually seen at Citizenship Day, but good to know. Moving on to slide number 27, part 5 of the form. This is information about people's parents. This is a bit expanded compared to former versions of the form. It asks, were your parents married before your 18th birthday, which we don't really know exactly why they're asking that, unless the parents are citizens. So the reason that these questions are on here is because of something called derived citizenship or derivative citizenship. People whose parents naturalized before they turn 18 often automatically convert into citizens, and at least one per Citizenship Day will have a client who comes to apply for citizenship and turns out they already are a citizen. They didn't know. And so if you have a client that says yes to 2 or 3, like their mother or father was a U.S. citizen, is a U.S. citizen, and became a U.S. citizen before the person turned 18, flag that because the attorney, it may be worth the attorney reviewing it to confirm if the person's a citizen. They don't need to finish filling out this 20-page form if they're already a citizen.
What do you mean by flag? I mean, what's the physical action of flagging? Is it an actual little...
No. Good question. We will have Post-its for you, and we rely on Post-its a lot. So if you're filling out the form by hand, there are some sites that will be doing it by hand, some sites on the computer. If you're filling it out by hand, post it directly on that section of the form. If you're doing it on the computer, just a Post-it on the intake form, because that's a hard copy form that we'll be moving throughout with the client, that just says part 5, page 6, I have a question about this. And the attorney will know to review all of those things. That's a really good question. Physical Post-it flags. Also, feel free to find the person in the Waiver picture if you have something that you're not sure about. For example, derivative citizenship is a good thing to ask about. On the bottom of this page, part 6, is the information to run a background check. That's the biometrics that we were talking about. It's okay to just get someone's ID and copy it directly off. It used to ask weight, which was awkward. It doesn't ask weight anymore, but it still asks for height, weight, height, hair color, eye color, all that stuff. And you can either ask them or you can just get their driver's license and copy it off of there. One thing that comes up all the time is that for race, they don't give you an option for Hispanic or Latino. And it's USCIS, that's the rules. They don't consider that a race, it's an ethnicity. And so you can just have a conversation with the client and say, sorry, you have to choose between one. I know this doesn't make sense. I didn't make the form, but it's the rules. According to USCIS official guidance, they think it's okay for Hispanics or Latinos to check white. So you can tell people that, and then if they're okay with it, you can do that, or you can ask them to pick. But just a flag for you on that one. Slide 28 asks about employment. So that we're on part 7 of the N400 Form, which is on page 6. And it asks about employment in schools where you've attended. And again, just like the addresses, it's asking for within the last 5 years. If somebody was...
That's outside.
If somebody was in school, or if they've had a job, you have to fill that in. If they've had extended periods of unemployment, I would say within the 5 years, if they were really unemployed, or for example on unemployment, you can write that in. You would want to write that in. It says in the instructions, if you were self-employed, unemployed, or studying, you want to just go ahead and write that in and write the dates during which that was your employment status for the last 5 years. Again, this is another section that only provides 4 spaces. So if someone has had a lot of different jobs within the last 5 years, you may be preparing an additional sheet, and we'll have one pre-formatted for you on site. Slide number 29, so part 8 is on page 7 of the actual form, is talking about time outside the United States. So this gets at both the residence and the physical presence requirements that Greg went over. So what they're asking is how many total days did you spend outside the United States during the last 5 years? One note on that is transit days, so days that you were like flying out of the U.S. or flying back into the U.S. do not count as days outside the U.S. Only full 24 hours outside of the borders count. Trips to Mexico and Canada count. People maybe sometimes don't know that. And a change from the old form, it used to ask you on this grid to list out every single trip since you became a legal permanent resident, which for some people is 20 or 30 years, and that was hard to do. Now it's only 5 years, which is great. And folks should come prepared with a list of their trips, but sometimes you need to ask them to get out their passports if they're in there, or you need to say, have you ever, gone back to Mexico? And they're like, oh yeah, we go once every weekend. We go for a whole weekend once a month or something like that. And so you have to kind of work that out. USCIS has said that it's okay if it's a case like that where someone goes really regularly and they maybe aren't going to have a passport stamp and know the exact dates to write a statement, something like that. Like, for the last 5 years, I've gone to Mexico for 1 month in the summer every year. But otherwise, try to do your best to format it the way that they have it on here. Date you left, date you returned, did the trip last 6 months or more, countries to which you traveled, and total days outside the United States. Things that you're going to want to flag are any yeses for did the trip last 6 months or more. The attorney needs to review that. And if the total number of days is getting close to half of their LPR time of their statutory period. So for the 5-year statutory period, that's 913 days total outside the U.S. And for the 3-year period, it's 548. If you see it starting to get close to that, that's another flag for the attorneys.
What were the 2 numbers again?
913 for 5 years and 548 for 3 years. Slide 30, part 9, talks about marital history. This is another section that's greatly expanded from how it used to be on the old form. It asks for more information about people's spouses, like are they in the armed forces? Question number 2, that's new. Previous legal name of your current spouse, other names used by your current spouse, and the current spouse's present employer. They didn't need to ask those questions. Hopefully the person has that information. If they don't have it, but they can get it, then maybe we'll just want to leave it. You'll probably just want to leave it blank and then have them fill that in later. If they don't have it and there's no way that they can get it, then we'll just do our best to fill in everything we can. Did you have a question? Okay. I think that's it for that section. The marital history continues on to the next page, page 9, on slide 31. If it asks about the citizenship status of people's spouses, if they are a U.S. citizen, did they become a citizen at birth or did they naturalize? And if they did naturalize, you need the date of naturalization of that person. If they're not a U.S. citizen, you have to put in their country of citizenship or nationality. And then if they're a permanent resident, you put their A number. If they're not a permanent resident, you need to check the other box, and it's okay to write. You want to write either if. For example, spouses that are undocumented, which we run into all the time, is...
That's someone's phone. Someone might have put us on mute.
We've got beautiful music coming through. I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully it will resolve itself. You want to, for undocumented spouses, citizenship status, you can check current spouse's immigration status, check other, and write alien. You don't need to give them any more information than that. It's an accurate statement, and it doesn't involve any potential complications. So that's what you want to put there.
Is there generally a concern from the client about that?
It is something that people get worried about.
Get worried about? Okay.
Yeah. So
Does that affect? Shouldn't affect theirs?
It shouldn't affect their ability to naturalize.
What?
If they have an undocumented spouse.
No, it's always a reason for concern, and the government just generally hasn't taken any action about it. And the thing is, if they don't provide that information, they're providing false information to the government. So you don't want to do that. You want to answer accurately and truthfully. I think we've got someone who put us on hold, which means we can't even communicate with them now. And so for those of you on the phone, sorry about that. We can't.
We can't hang
problem
up
is we can't hang
for
up their phone. Yeah. So we'll continue to talk.
Do we even have the power to? Can we like mute everybody from our? No. We don't have the power, unfortunately. We're powerless.
Yeah. So we'll just keep talking.
I'm gonna keep talking, and if it's driving you too crazy, you can try hanging up and calling back in, or else, get the video and pick up from here. I'm sorry again about this. Has not happened quite as difficult in this. This amount of difficulty has not happened in the past. There's also questions about people continuing on marital status. There's questions about how many times has your current spouse been married. So if it's just once because you've only been married to each other, that's easy. But if they've been married before, you have to give information about the about the spouse's prior spouses. And again, this is information that hopefully people will have, but potentially they won't. And you can just do your very best to get the information that you can, and then leave parts blank and make sure that you just put a little post-it note saying they didn't have this information so that the attorney can review with them and make sure that they fill it in later. And then page 10 continues with marital status. There's a lot of marital history going on. So it's just more information about prior spouses and more space. So a lot of that will be able to be left. If none of this applies, if there are sections throughout the form that do not apply to the client you're working with, it's okay to leave it blank. But this stuff will be blank for most people. Part 10, which is on page 10, gets to children. Greg mentioned this a little bit, that it's important that we capture information about all children that have passed away, children that are in a different country, children that are stepchildren or adopted children or of a previous marriage. So you just want to make sure that you explain that to them. It's not just children that you have that live with you right now. And it asks for a number of pieces of information about the children. If children are under 18 and they're legal permanent residents and this naturalization application is successful, they will automatically convert into citizens. So we want to make sure that we capture that information so that can happen. And so then the children's section continues through page 12. So just know that. And then we get to the really fun part, which starts on page 13, part 11.
Is there any special annotation we need to make for people who are petitioning under VAWA or U-Visa status on this marital information? Because sometimes, often their users, the reason why they have their LPR status.
Yeah, I mean I know they have a special eligibility reason on the first page, right?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that though.
I don't believe that there's anything special about the marital history. I mean, you still want to list the former spouse. I did this with a client that got a green card through VAWA. And you still want to list out the, all the information that you can about the spouse. The person probably has it because that was important for the VAWA petition, right? So, as far as I know, I didn't have to make any special designation on the form. So, good question. So, want to make sure we have time for this. So, page 13, part 11, my favorite sentence. The answers to the next 53 questions, many with subparts, could lead not only to denial of naturalization, but also initiation of removal proceedings. This is where a lot of the good moral character stuff comes in. So we want to make sure we pay specific attention to this section of the form. And this is the section of the form that's most expanded. Hi, we're sorry about the music.
Yeah, there's a background music, so we can get anything
Yeah, we know it's somebody on the line who pushed hold on their line, which is sending that through. Should we just turn it down?
If they're hearing it, that's the problem. We're not
I know. Unfortunately, we don't really have any power to get rid of it. Hey, can you type? ask Ellicott to send an email to the whole group? We're going to try to send an email to everyone. The problem is we can't tell them because they aren't hearing us to turn it off. So we're going to send an email to them asking them to hang up their phone. If it's just driving you completely insane on the phone, I understand. Hang up, send us an email, we'll send you the video, and I'm sorry, we're doing the best we can. When you get to this section of the N400 on page 13, I strongly suggest that you kind of take a pause with the clients and let them know there's a lot of questions coming up that might sound awkward. These are questions that I have to ask you. It's part of the form that the government put together. So bear with me kind of thing, because it's a good way to sort of frame some of the following questions. It's also good to ask these questions slowly and in multiple ways and clarify the words. A lot of them have subparts. So you just want to make sure you're taking time and not just rushing through these sections. So we're looking at it now. So on page 13, part 11, basically the big takeaway for this entire section, for those of you that are going to be paralegal, is to, anything that the answer is yes is going to require attorney review and additional explanation. So you're going to just want to make sure that you flag any yes answers. That doesn't mean that the person's not eligible or can't establish good moral character. As you see, some of these questions may or may not impact that, but it does say in the instructions that any yes answer requires an explanation, and we will want the attorneys to help them put together that explanation. I don't know if there's anything else I want to add to that. On questions 6 through 8, those are about taxes, and I just want to flag that it does ask you in question 7, have you ever not filed a federal or state tax return? A lot of our clients don't make enough money to have to file. However, they still have to mark yes to that because they have not filed in a year or 1 or more years. There will be a special form that they can say, during 2012, I did not earn enough money to have to file. But just know that you will have to have them mark yes if the answer is yes, is that they did not indeed file a tax return.
That's just for the period that's being examined, or
ever?
Person who just took us off hold, don't do that again and puts music to the phone, please.
I don't know if they are even on the line or if they just hung up, but whatever it is, it's great, and please don't ever push hold again.
And Lily, just speak up a little bit more, but I think the sound would be good. Yeah.
everyone officially.
And now if we'd all start singing. No.
Yay, celebration. So we go to the next page of the good moral character questions. So it's page 14. The question at the top is 11. There's some tough questions on here. 14 and 15 ask, were you ever involved in any way with torture, genocide, trying to kill someone, badly hurting someone? For the most part, the answers to these questions are going to be no, but we do see clients that come through that got their green card because they're a refugee or an asylee. Maybe they're a victim of one of these things. And the question is so broad, it says, were you ever involved in any way? Unfortunately, those people, the guidance is that those people have to say yes to those things and then explain. Hopefully, as the new form rolls its way out, they might make some changes to it, so we won't have to deal with that. But for now, if you have somebody that's a victim of those things, you do have to, check yes and then flag it for the attorney so they can help them clarify.
If you don't know to check yes or no, can you just leave it blank for the attorney?
Yeah, and I would just make sure that you put a note because they may not, just so that they for sure know that you've done that. Yeah.
And Lily, did you also say that there might be boxes that are blank just because if you've answered no and it says if you answered yes, please answer these other questions. You can have some that are blank. But if there's one that it's either yes or no and you've left it blank, really make sure that's flagged because we don't want to submit something that has a blank that should have something there.
Especially within this section.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm going to go on to the next page. It's kind of cut off at the top there. But it starts with question number 16, it's page 15. A lot of these questions say, for example, 18, if yes, there's an additional question. So in that case, it's okay to leave those parts blank because they only need to answer that if yes. The first part of the question is yes. These are some of those same questions. Were you ever a worker, volunteer, soldier in a prison or something like that? So technically, someone who's a prison guard, totally legitimately in the U.S. would have to mark yes to that, and then attach an explanation. So again, the takeaway for this is that yes answers don't necessarily mean that people can't naturalize or it's going to be a big problem, but it needs a second, set of eyes on it. Question number 23, which is down at the bottom. That's criminal convictions, and the question is, have you ever been arrested, cited, or detained by any law enforcement officer for any reason? And so that actually includes things like traffic citations. That's a citation. So if somebody even just has a speeding ticket, they still have to mark yes, and that's going to be something that's not necessarily going to be a problem for them, but you do have to mark yes. If they have anything essentially above a traffic violation, like a speeding ticket, then it's going to be a flag for the attorney, and you may hear us talking about the fact that they need to go see the special attorney, which is the attorney with the criminal expertise. So hopefully we've caught it before they get to you. They've actually already been cleared by that special attorney for whatever criminal issue they have in their past, but if they haven't, make sure that you flag that. The words that have been added from the form, it now says, have you ever committed, assisted in committing, or attempted to commit? It's not just committed. So you have to ask it read it as asked, and you might want to sort of clarify with the person, because a lot of times when it's a sentence with multiple parts, they'll just sort of ask the last part. So you can say like assisted, yes or no, attempted, yes or no. So you want to make sure that you kind of break up those questions a little bit. The next page, page 16, has a place where you're going to, on number 29, if the person did have any type of conviction, including a traffic ticket, you need to explain it. So a common thing that we see is someone had a speeding ticket, right? So you put, why were you arrested, speeding, the date, where it was, and the outcome, which is typically paid the fine. Don't fill out that section unless it's that. I'm comfortable with paralegals doing that much, but if it's something above and beyond that, just don't fill out that section and let the attorney do it. If there's other outcomes, other types of reasons for detention, that kind of thing. Any questions about that can be kind of a tricky.
So how do we address the issue of non-retention of things like speeding citations? I just did my bar app, and I'm old, so I have lots of speeding tickets from back in the day, and they want everything. But you can't get a copy pass. I think it's 5 years retention.
Do your best.
For like a speeding ticket, it's not going to be something you're going to provide anyway, because
you don't need the actual documents.
Yeah.
You just have to put the date and.
But like I'm old and I don't remember dates, so I'm sure the clients might be in the same position, I'm old enough.
Same as with the addresses and things like that. You just have to, you do your best and you say, I think I got a ticket back in like 1991 and I think it was in Alabama and I was speeding, and you can just put like approximately for the date.
Just do it.
And I think if you can approximate the amount of a fine too, that helps kind of people get a sense of what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
Paid $100 fine.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, it's probably going to be okay.
Was there another question?
Yeah. I'm kind of, so like if you have partial information, you can fill it in and the rest you like a flag for the attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And do the people who come for the service, do they bring their criminal documents so they can see them?
Yes, they should. I mean, this is all on all of our materials and all our outreach materials, but we could tell people things 20 times and they still end up without having it, and if they don't have it, it may be that they aren't able to finish their application that day.
And one thing we won't do is, if someone says they do have this criminal stuff, and we've been talking to them, and we haven't seen it, we're not going to let them file, because we don't know whether that is enough to get them deported or
A lot of times people will say, oh, I had something, but it was like 10 years ago and it's all taken care of, and that's not enough information. So, and our attorneys will be doing that review, but so if they mention that to you, you can say like, oh, you mentioned this. Please talk more about that. On the bottom of the page 16 that we're talking about, question number 30, this is not a new question, but there's two things that I wanted to flag that are added. Part E asks explicitly, have you ever married someone in order to obtain an immigration benefit? And then I, have you ever made any misrepresentation to obtain any public benefit in the United States? I doubt that anyone's going to say yes to either of those questions, but if they do, that's a big deal. Make sure your attorney knows about it. For any of those questions, but those two are new and particularly, I think, sort of intense. Continuing with part 11, the longest part of the form, page 17. the questions 31 through 36 ask about previous interactions with the immigration system, like detention or deportation, or any lies to, have you ever lied to the U.S. government to get admission? That deals with the sort of, did you get your green card through legitimate means or not kind of question. Again, for the most part, no one's going to say yes to any of these questions, but if they do say, like, oh yeah, they actually did deport me a long time ago, but that was a long time ago, and I got my green card, you're still going to want to flag that, because we just need to make sure that we've checked it. 37 and 38 ask about military service. There are some specific special naturalization provisions for military service people. They can naturalize faster. So they're asking that. They ask it really late in the form, but it's there. And then down at number 46 is an important question. It asks about selective service. So all males within this country that are aged 18 to 26 have to register for selective service, even if they're here undocumented, here in unauthorized status. Nobody really knows that. I mean, a lot of people don't know that, right? They don't know that they have to do that, but they are required to do it. So a lot of people will know that they needed to register. They did register. You have to put in the date that they registered and their selective service number. They might not have that. It's really easy to look up. You can look it up on site. You'll have access to at least one computer, or you'll have your own computer. And you just go to sss.gov, and you have to enter their, I think it's name, date of birth, and social security number, and it'll pop up with it. Or it will say, this person's not in here. So this question continues on to the next page. If you're dealing with somebody who is currently 18 to 26 and male and has not registered, they need to do so before they can naturalize. You can actually help them do that. It's pretty straightforward. It's on the website at sss.gov. If they have everything they need and they're okay with doing it right then, you can go ahead and do it, and you can even print out the proof that they did it, and then that can go with their application. If they're now 26 or older and they didn't register because they didn't know that they had to, that's generally not going to be a problem. The only problem is if people did not register willfully. They knew they were supposed to, but they didn't do it. So if folks didn't know that they had to, they will be able to, and the not registering is within the last 5 years, so that means that they are 26 to 31 years old. Then they need to attach a special explanation, and then they have to request something called a status information letter, which is a special thing from Selective Service. You can just mention it, as a paralegal, you can just mention it to them that they're going to need to do some additional explanation with that, and then the attorney will help them actually deal with it. If they did not register and they're male and they're currently 31 or over, you don't need to worry about it. It's out of the 5-year period. So it's a good moral character issue. Questions about that?
I just tried to do it online just while you were talking, and I was able to pull it up immediately.
So you can even do it on your phone. I don't have a computer right there. The last part on page 18, the last several set questions are about the oath, the citizenship oath. At naturalization, they will be taking the oath of citizenship, so it asks them questions about, do they support the oath? Are they willing to take the oath? You will have little half sheets with the oath in multiple different languages, English and lots of different languages. So at that point in the form, you can hand them the oath and say, these questions are about this oath, can you read it? And then, because you have to ask them, do you understand the oath? Are you willing to take the oath? They should actually know what it says. So you'll have that little half sheet, and they can take that home if they know what it is. Another added question that I really like is question number 53, which asks, are you willing to give up any title of nobility that you have in another country? So if you have a queen or a princess or a duke coming to naturalization, that's exciting. So you've never had one before, but also they have to give that up when they become citizen of the U.S. So they have to be willing to do that, or else they can't naturalize. So essentially, after question 53, you are done as a paralegal. There's a section for the signature that the person does not sign until the attorneys actually review the form. There's a part 13 that you might see on the form that's called the preparer's signature. That's for the attorney to sign. You will not be signing it. And then there's also, as the form continues, there's the interpreter statement in the back. So if you're going to maybe be interpreting, just make sure that you've reviewed that. Questions about the N400? So in the room, or else I'm going to give a minute for folks on the phone to unmute themselves and ask any questions about the N400. form.
130.
Go ahead.
Is it possible that we'd see anyone with the eligibility reasons 3 or 4 on the basis of military service or engaged in specific employment abroad?
It's possible. It's never happened since I've been doing Citizenship Day. The question is, are we going to see anybody who's eligible under military service or special employment abroad? If you do see that, if someone's like, oh, I don't fit into these two, but I still get to qualify because of this, just find either a One America person or an attorney and just clarify that. So real quick, I know we're almost running out of time. I want to get your questions. So
About how long should we be spending with each lawyer?
good question. So prior to this new version of the form, I would say that paralegals used to spend an average of about 45 minutes with the person. I anticipate it's going to be an hour with this new form. It might be a little longer if it's more complicated. So we're building that in. We're making sure there's lots of you there so that we can serve as many people as possible, knowing that it's going to take a while.
How many people usually come, or applicants?
It depends on the site. Where are you volunteering?
Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon's usually pretty big. I would say we'll probably see somewhere between 50 and 80 people. Could be more, could be less. We're doing a ton of outreach, so we'll see. It varies a little bit, but that site's usually pretty big. Bigger. Probably like 70 to 90.
If you translate the document and you're filling it out, you do have to fill out the interpreter.
Only if the person is so does the interpreter have to sign the interpreter statement? Only if you're interpreting the form and the person's applying for a waiver of the English test. If they're not applying for the waiver, if they're not the 50-20 or 55-15, and you interpret it for them, it's fine, but you don't have to do it on the form. I'm trying to think if we have time to do this. I don't think we have time to go over the fee waiver section of the training. Please look up the I-912 form, which you have if you came to the training in person, and we'll send it out to everybody, or we already probably sent it out, and the instructions, and then we will do a quick training. Only a few designated paralegals will be doing the fee waivers with people probably on site anyways, so we'll just do a quick training on site with folks that are going to be doing those. And then the rest of it, we've talked about that people are automatically citizens when a parent naturalizes and they're under 18. And I just want to show everybody Carmen's picture. Carmen was one of our more recent clients. She's 79. She was eligible for 17 years but hadn't applied. And she came to one of our citizenship days, and she's already sent in her application there. And she probably just did her interview really recently, because this was in December. So these are the people you're going to be working with. There's a lot of things to remember and a lot of details, but ultimately this is people's stories, and this is the really exciting part of the day, is that you're going to be spending the day with people from all over the world, helping them finally achieve their dream of citizenship. So just a huge thank you. My contact information is at the end of the PowerPoint. I know we had a lot of technical difficulties on the phone, so please make sure you contact us, and we'll get you the video, we'll get you all the handouts, and we'll say sorry a lot of times. And then also, if you have any questions before Citizenship Day, please get in touch with us. You even have our contact information for our key people in the American Immigration Lawyers Association who do Citizenship Day. So if you have like a really specific legal question, you can email them or call them. And I will see some of you on April 26th. I won't be at all 4 places, but I'll be there. And we have other wonderful staff who will be there as well. So thank you again so much, and let us know if you have questions. Number 46 is an important question. It asks about selective service. So all males within this country that are aged 18 to 26 have to register for selective service, even if they're here undocumented, here in unauthorized status. Nobody really knows that. I mean, a lot of people don't know that, right? They don't know that they have to do that, but they are required to do it. So a lot of people will know that they needed to register. They did register. You have to put in the date that they registered and their selective service number. They might not have that. It's really easy to look up. You can look it up on site. You'll have access to at least one computer, or you'll have your own computer. And you just go to sss.gov, and you have to enter their, I think it's name, date of birth, and social security number, and it'll pop up with it. Or it will say, this person's not in here. So this question continues on to the next page. If you're dealing with somebody who is currently 18 to 26 and male and has not registered, they need to do so before they can naturalize. You can actually help them do that. It's pretty straightforward. It's on the website at sss.gov. If they have everything they need and they're okay with doing it right then, you can go ahead and do it, and you can even print out the proof that they did it, and then that can go with their application. If they're now 26 or older and they didn't register because they didn't know that they had to, that's generally not going to be a problem. The only problem is if people did not register willfully. They knew they were supposed to, but they didn't do it. So if folks didn't know that they had to, they will be able to, and the not registering is within the last 5 years, so that means that they are 26 to 31 years old. Then they need to attach a special explanation, and then they have to request something called a status information letter, which is a special thing from Selective Service. You can just mention it, as a paralegal, you can just mention it to them that they're going to need to do some additional explanation with that, and then the attorney will help them actually deal with it. If they did not register and they're male and they're currently 31 or over, you don't need to worry about it. It's out of the 5-year period. So it's a good moral character issue. Questions about that?
I just tried to do it online just while you were talking, and I was able to pull it up immediately.
So you can even do it on your phone. You don't have a computer right there. The last part on page 18, the last several set questions are about the oath, the citizenship oath. At naturalization, they will be taking the oath of citizenship, so it asks them questions about, do they support the oath? Are they willing to take the oath? You will have little half sheets with the oath in multiple different languages, English and lots of different languages. So at that point in the form, you can hand them the oath and say, these questions are about this oath, can you read it? And then, because you have to ask them, do you understand the oath? Are you willing to take the oath? They should actually know what it says. So you'll have that little half sheet, and then they can take that home if they know what it is. Another added question that I really like is question number 53, which asks, are you willing to give up any title of nobility that you have in another country? So if you have a queen or a princess or a duke coming to naturalization, that's exciting. We've never had one before. But also, they have to give that up when they become citizen of the U.S. So they have to be willing to do that, or else they can't naturalize. So essentially, after question 53, you are done as the paralegal. There's a section for the signature, but the person does not sign until the attorney's actually reviewed the form. There's a part 13 that you might see on the form that's called the preparer's signature. That's for the attorney to sign. You will not be signing it. And then there's also, as the form continues, there's the interpreter statement in the back. So if you're going to maybe be interpreting, just make sure that you've reviewed that. Questions about the N400? So in the room, or else I'm going to give a minute for folks on the phone to unmute themselves and ask any questions about the N400 form.
1:30.
Go ahead.
Is it possible that we'd see anyone with the eligibility reasons 3 or 4 on the basis of military service or mediation-specific employment abroad?
It's possible. It's never happened since I've been doing Citizenship Day. The question is, are we going to see anybody who's eligible under military service or special employment abroad? If you do see that, if someone's like, oh, I don't fit into these two, but I still get to qualify because of this, just find either a One America person or an attorney and just clarify that. So real quick, I know we're almost running out of time. I want to get your questions. So
About how long should you be spending with each?
good question. So prior to this new version of the form, I would say that paralegals used to spend an average about 45 minutes with the person. I anticipate it's going to be an hour with this new form. It might be a little longer if it's more complicated. So we're building that in. We're making sure there's lots of you there so that we can serve as many people as possible, knowing that it's going to take a while.
How many people usually come, or applicants?
It depends on the site. Where are you volunteering?
Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon's usually pretty big. I would say we'll probably see somewhere between 50 and 80 people. Could be more, could be less. We're doing a ton of outreach, so we'll see. It varies a little bit, but that site's usually pretty big. Bigger. Probably like 70 to 90.
If you translate the document and you're filling it out, you do have to fill out the interpreter.
Only if the person is so does the interpreter have to sign the interpreter statement? Only if you're interpreting the form and the person is applying for a waiver of the English test. If they're not applying for the waiver, if they're not the 50-20 or 55-15, and you interpret it for them, it's fine, but you don't have to do it on the form. I'm trying to think if we have time to do this. Yeah, I don't think we have time to go over the fee waiver section of the training. Please look up the I-912 form, which you have if you came to the training in person, and we'll send it out to everybody, or we already probably sent it out, and the instructions. And then we will do a quick training. Only a few designated paralegals will be doing the fee waivers with people, probably on site anyways. So we'll just do a quick training on site with folks that are going to be doing those. And then the rest of it, we've talked about that people are automatically citizens when a parent naturalizes and they're under 18. And I just want to show everybody Carmen's picture. Carmen was one of our more recent clients. She's 79. She was eligible for 17 years but hadn't applied. And she came to one of our citizenship days, and she's all ready to send in her application there. And she probably just did her interview really recently because this was in December. So these are the people you're going to be working with. There's a lot of things to remember and a lot of details, but ultimately these are people's stories, and this is the really exciting part of the day, is that you're going to be spending the day with people from all over the world, helping them finally achieve their dream of citizenship. So just a huge thank you. My contact information is at the end of the PowerPoint. I know we had a lot of technical difficulties on the phone, so please make sure you contact us, and we'll get you the video, we'll get you all the handouts, and we'll say sorry a lot of times. And then also, if you have any questions before Citizenship Day, please get in touch with us. You even have our contact information for our key people in the American Immigration Lawyers Association who do Citizenship Day. So if you have like a really specific legal question, you can email them or call them. And I will see some of you on April 26th. I won't be at all 4 places, but I'll be there. And we have other wonderful staff who will be there as well. So thank you again so much, and let us know if you have questions. All right, so we're just going to take a couple minutes to go over the fee waiver form. That's the form I-912. We mentioned earlier in the training that folks are eligible for the fee waiver if they either receive means-tested benefits, that's public benefits where their income determines whether they're eligible for them or not. Common means-tested benefits are food stamps, TANF, and Medicaid. And then if they don't receive means-tested benefits, but they still have a household income of 150% of the federal poverty level or below, they should also be eligible. Technically, they're also eligible under something called Part C, which is if their household has a compelling financial hardship. But at Citizenship Day, we will not be completing any fee waivers based on that because it's extremely hard to prove. So we can refer people out if they really want to file a fee waiver but need help preparing that section. So when you're done with your client, we will have designated paralegals doing fee waivers, but in some cases you may be asked to do both the N400 form and the fee waiver form. So after you finish the N400, ask the client if they know about the $680 filing fee, or if they were interested in filling out the application for the fee waiver or seeing if they qualify. You can use our pre-made fee waiver screening sheets that have the chart that says what 150% of the federal poverty level is based on household size to screen the person. And it'll also help you determine if they have one of the more common public benefits. So you want to make sure that the person is eligible under Part A or B, and then that they have proof of income or benefits. So things like last year's tax return or pay stubs counts as proof of income, and then a letter on, company letterhead from DSHS that says that they receive food stamps or something like that counts as proof of receipt of public benefits. And the folks should know that they need to bring that ahead of time, and you can just take a look and make sure that they have it. So, and if we go to the next slide, it goes over a little bit about how to file. So the fee waiver form is Form I-912. Please review the I-912 form itself and the instructions, which we've sent out to you. It's pretty straightforward if you go through the instructions on how to file. You fill in the client's name and information in Part 1. And then if the client is eligible under Part A, meaning that they receive public benefits, all you have to do is fill out Section 1 through 3, Section 4, and Section 7 on the I-912 form. So look through the I-912, find those sections. It's basically the client's information, if they have any dependents that they're including in this fee waiver request, what the form is that they're asking for the fee to be waived. So in Citizenship Day, that's going to always be Form N400. And then in Section 4, you're just indicating that they receive public benefits, what they receive, who receives them in the household, etc. And then Section 7, which is the client's signature information. And then if they're eligible under Part B, similarly, the 150% of the poverty line, you just do the Sections 1 through 3, which is all the client information, dependents, etc. And then Section 5 and Section 7 only. You don't have to fill out the whole form for everybody, just fill out the applicable parts based on their eligibility. And then on the intake form, you want to, which is the yellow form that we have you check all your boxes on, you want to check off the box that says that the fee waiver was completed so that the attorney can review it afterwards. And if you have any questions about fee waivers, you can find your AILA site coordinator, your attorney site coordinator, who will be introduced to you at the beginning of the day on site, or one of the One America staff that are on site.